Yes. So the more, as we know, we are clear on a certain things that this is going to be an interactive session, and I would honestly accept that I do not have any Divya Gyan to give you, because as far as academic English writing strategies are concerned, I feel there is nothing which I can bring to your knowledge which already you do not know. But still, the session, the topic, and the discussion is relevant because I'll be bringing a fresh perspective to it. Plus, I'll be actually facilitating a proper thought streamlining as far as the idea is concerned, right? So the topic is already clear upon you all that I'll be speaking on academic English writing strategies. Now, why do we need to talk about academic English writing strategies, and why English only? Because majority of the times, whenever we actually indulge in academic discussions, conversations, or whatever academic contribution we make, it is normally in English language. And as majority of the faculty members happen to be the science from the science stream, so if you are actually looking forward to international publications and all, then English is the best option available to you all, right? Mm, excuse- Yes. So is the slide clear to you all?
Yes, madam, it is clear. Yeah.
Okay, good. So
Yes, ma'am.
before we begin with, it would be good if we set the objective. So what is it that I'm looking forward to? So I'm looking forward to giving you an understanding of the conventions of academic writing in English. Then I'm looking forward to help you all put together your own toolbox. As I declared earlier, also majority of the things are such that you already might be aware of them all. So we'll be organizing them, putting them together in proper order, as well as to give you a chance to reflect on your development as a writer. So you would be in a position to place yourself. Then to encourage reflection on discipline specific conventions. Although we'll be dealing with generic skills, we are not going to be discipline centric, but then still, what we would be discussing would be of such nature that you would be in a position to apply it and meet your own particular needs, right? Yes. So, first and foremost, there is a saying which says that Henry Ford's observation, I would like to quote: nothing is particularly hard if you divide it into small jobs. So, it is going to be a lecture of 2 hours, but if we actually define lines, if we divide it into sections, then it would actually seem to be easy and swift, right? So, in first, yes, okay. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So we'll be talking about why academic English writing. Then there would be an icebreaker because I need you all to be out of that sedative mode of post lunch session. Then we'll be talking about structuring the text and conveying the argument. What are the nuances? Then there would be again a short break. Of course, you would not be required to go anywhere in this break, but then we'll be breaking from the topic and we'll be talking about something which is relevant, which is important, and which will provide you with some food for thought. After this, we'll be talking about editing and proofreading. Then another food for thought break. After that, we'll be talking about summarizing and paraphrasing, then avoiding plagiarism, publication ethics, and then recapitulation. Right. Okay. So, first and foremost, I wanted to draw your attention towards the stream in which we are and the responsibility which we have, right? So, it is said that enlightened, emancipated, and empowered teachers lead communities and nations in their march towards perfection. And the point that you have joined this workshop, it itself is sufficient to highlight the fact that you are all already enlightened and empowered teachers who are not only aware of their responsibility, but also are willing to put in efforts and improvise themselves at every opportunity available, right? So, as I said that before we actually embark upon our journey, I would actually want to use an icebreaker, and there is an agenda behind it. So, it's a small game where I would be wanting your participation. So, the title of the game is Would You Rather? Has anyone ever by chance played this game before?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I did.
Okay, that would be good. So here, I would be wanting you is, there are some would you rather questions. There are two ways of actually doing this game. You can try it in your classrooms also. So what we do is we make this, if we are actually using it with students, we make them write would you rather questions, come up with their own would you rather questions. But here, because the number of participants would be more, so I would actually offer you a ready-made list of would you rather questions. While I'll want you all to use the chat box to comment which one would be the preferable option for you. What is it that you would be liking to choose? Okay, so would you rather use your imagination and free yourself? You are here participants, not teachers, not principals, not academicians, but participants in the learning process. So we are all here together. I and you, we are participants, right? So please free your minds and participate with full enthusiasm. So would you rather be a genius and know everything, or be amazing at any activity you try? So if you're given a choice in life to do one of the things, what is it that you would want to do? Okay, so let me see. Yes. Okay, so amazing. Sunil says be amazing. Anusha madam says amazing. Padmavati madam says amazing. Nidhi Chaudhary, amazing. Okay, so everyone would want to be amazing rather than be a genius. Okay, taken. Good. Next question is, would you rather be the richest person in the world or be immortal? So, richest or immortal? None, neither richest nor immortal. Okay, Padmavati ji, right. Jayanti madam, none. Others? No, richest, Sunil sir. Okay, good. And others? Nidhi madam, difficult. Okay, Vikrant sir, richest. Anusha madam, richest. Others? Yes, richest or immortal? Good. Third question, would you rather experience the world beginning or ending? So if you get an opportunity to experience this world, how you would want to see it? The beginning. Okay, neither. So you're settled, happy with this. Okay, beginning. Okay, so Neil sir, beginning. Jayanti madam, beginning. Usha madam, beginning. Yes, others? Others? We have some 64 participants, but the answers doesn't reflect on it. Others? Are you still in that sleeping mode? Be quick. Raman sir, beginning. Okay. So would you rather have more money or more time? So what is it that you'll prefer? Padmavati madam, more time. Okay. Vinay sir, time. Others? Yes? Jinsa, time. Kavya, Jayanti, time. More time and money. Both ways, no. Would you rather one? Actually, time. Yes. So time definitely is important. Then it's subjective. It depends, right? Then would you rather live by Hakuna Matata or YOLO? So are we clear on Hakuna Matata and YOLO? What is meant by Hakuna Matata?
No.
Any idea? Yes?
No, madam.
Okay. So Hakuna Matata means there are no problems. Don't worry about it. So when you live Hakuna Matata way, so basically you are telling yourself there are no problems and therefore no need to worry in life. But when you say YOLO, so you're telling yourself you only live once. So do whatever you wish to do in life because there is no second chance. So you only live once. So what would you prefer, YOLO or Hakuna Matata? Okay, YOLO. Anusha madam, YOLO. Shailya, YOLO. Sunil sir, YOLO. Binay sir, YOLO. Others? I have so many participants. Yes, please. Hakuna Matata or YOLO? What you prefer? Hakuna Matata. Kavya madam. Raman sir, YOLO. Others? Chandra Kumar sir, Hakuna Matata. Okay. So next is, would you rather know the world's secrets or live ignorantly forever? So up till now, those who have answered, please, tell it yourself. Let others use chat box. Others, let me see. Are you there with me or not? So if you're there with me, please mark your presence. Yes, others, hold yourself. You just think about it. Okay. So would you rather know the world's secrets or live ignorantly forever? Fresnel. Fresnel, am I right? You're Fresnel?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Right,
good.
right.
Thank you. World secrets. Okay, Chandra Kumar sir, ignorant. Take life as it comes. Okay. Kavya's ignorant. Reshma, no world secrets. Okay, then would you rather do something you love or make just enough money to get by, or do something you hate but make billions of dollars? So you would want to do something love and make money, or you would want to do something you hate but actually get a lot of money for it? What? So what you love, something you love. Yes, okay, good. Jinsha, Frenznell, Kavya, be nicer, love and make money. Okay. So the last question: would you rather give a boring online lecture while your students sleep, or share a video with them and will yourself sleep? Yes. So what will you prefer? Never boring. Okay. Others. So you would be giving them video and going to sleep, or would be delivering a boring online lecture? Boring online lecture, or you would make it interaction. Yes, interactive. Yes, never let anyone sleep, never boring. So I hope you are all there with me out of the box. Why I did this activity, and why I actually like using this activity is especially with the teachers. I have been training teachers of any age, like ranging from 25 to 60. I've spoken in front of all them all, so I make them all participate in activities, especially the teachers, because what happens is that the moment we enter into the teaching line, somehow we stop using our imagination. Sometimes somehow we actually miss that enthusiasm which is required actually to learn something. So I wanted you all to move into that interactive, enthusiastic, imaginative mode, where actually we would be interacting and mutually learning things. So I hope you are all there with me. Yes or no? Shall we proceed now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. So here we go. Academic English writing. Okay, so a rough why academic? You have been listening to the lectures throughout, right? So what is it that you actually think about academic writing? So why do we need to talk about academic writing? What do you think? Yes. Hmm? Why do we need to talk about academic writing?
We are conveying our ideas to the audience who could be at different parts of the world. So there should be a common understanding. So
Yes.
based on, so that is why there is a set of protocols or a methodology that we need to follow.
Yes, actually, focus on academic writing is really important because it's more formal in setting, and then it actually involves uh, high seriousness. Ideas actually are to be shared with academic fraternity, and you have to sometimes persuade them to believe in your ideas. Sometimes you have to actually write argumentative essays and all. Sometimes you have to do synthesis on certain things, but some rendering of knowledge, information, ideas is involved in it, and all these things actually become important. And for them, code of conducts for academic writing have been developed over the years through practice, and every practitioner of the art should be aware of them all. Okay, Sunil sir observes to convey knowledge in community and grow in new dimensions. Very, very true. Okay, yes. So the moment we talk about structuring of the text, right? So whatever you do, this I think already many people would have talked to you, because I am here on the day 4 of the workshop. So already you know that every academic writing. So there are different examples of academic writing, right? So what are different forms or examples of academic writing we can come up with? We have reports, we have research papers, essays, right? So we have summaries and all. So many things are there, right? So all these are examples of academic writing. Now every academic piece, it has a fixed defined structure, and the structure has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? So the moment we talk about beginning, it actually includes introduction in it. So now one thing which I would want to highlight, I know that all of you are teachers, and therefore this is something which you all have been telling our students, but still there are certain things which become important to talk about it. So overall, the moment you sit to write a research paper or an essay or any such formal thing, then you know that it has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in beginning, you actually talk about context, you talk about background, theoretical perspectives, or the layout. If you're actually writing PhD thesis or a project thesis, then you actually give a layout to the reader. So right after context, background, and theoretical perspective, you make the readers aware of the layout also, right? Then in middle part, you actually develop the discussion or analysis or the ideas which you had just conveyed the readers that you are intending to talk about it. And then there is conclusion. Now, one thing which is very important to keep in mind about conclusions is that there should not be any new addition of fact in the conclusion. I know that this already would have been talked to you, right? Have you discussed the structure of the text with anyone else also? Yes?
Yes,
Not
some of
audible. You can
the
use chat
yes,
box also.
yeah, some of
Yes?
the speakers have been commenting on this.
Yes. Okay. So normally you have talked about it, right? So you already have reflected upon it, the structure of the text, right?
Yes,
Yes, I expect this. But one thing which you should keep in mind that when you are developing the main body of the argument, then you actually have to use paragraph, topic, sentence form. We say, paragraph, topic, sentence form. Can anyone explain what this paragraph, topic, sentence form actually means? PTO form, PTS form rather. So what does it mean? So in development of the main body, we always actually tell scholars to follow this convention to make sure that they are following PTS form, which means paragraph, topic, sentence form. Now, what does paragraph, topic, sentence form means? Any idea?
Defining the main topic.
Mm-hmm. No, you have done that. Beginning is there. I'm talking about the main body. So when you're actually doing the main body, what is this is a practice which is followed by newspapers. So when generally followed by newspapers, I am actually forced to say generally because this is the time when every convention is being broken and the high seriousness of the journalism is somehow gone. But there were days when people actually followed everything strictly, and at that time newspapers had this practice of actually using paragraph, topic, sentence form. Means every paragraph, yes, every paragraph should contain, you're right, what's your name? It's not Anirban, you're right. So every paragraph will contain a single idea. So every paragraph also would be an independent unit. So even if the reader doesn't read the entire argument, just a paragraph, he should be in a position to understand the intent of that paragraph, right? So paragraph, topic, sentence forms means every paragraph should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So in paragraph also you would be following the same structure. So you will be telling them initially introducing the idea which you'll be talking about in this paragraph. Then you would be putting forth points in support or the discussion part and then the conclusion part. Uh, this makes the writing very swift and the clarity of thought which it actually attributes to the entire piece is actually significant. So it's very important then when you're doing your research papers that you make sure that every paragraph is developed as an independent entity with having clarity of thought, having a beginning, a middle, and an end. Right? Okay, so we'll proceed further now. So this you already know that structure is the framework that holds all the different parts of a text together. And normally, whether you are, because you're teachers, so you already have been working on project proposals, you have been working on PhD thesis or research papers or dissertations and all. So you know that whether it is a dissertation or a PhD thesis or a project proposal or a report also, somehow it follows the same order. So there is a title page, then after title page you actually give a summary or an abstract, then after that table of contents, then introduction, then you actually introduce the idea, theory, or hypothesis. So what is your hypothesis? After that you talk about it, then what methodology you will be using, then the results part, so you actually give a gist of it, then you actually develop the analysis part, discussion, you give detailed discussion so that readers can actually see it becoming, so right from the development of thought to the conclusion, Then after that, you actually give references, and referencing is very important. So we know that when we make submissions, there is a lot of emphasis by editors on referencing part. So why references are considered to be so important? So important that at times you feel that references are more important than even the main topic, right? At times when so much of emphasis is laid on references, we end up feeling like this also. What do you think? Why these references are so important? Yes? Yes? Why references are important? Are they not important? What do you
Yeah,
think?
they're very important. They're very
Okay.
important
Mhm.
because we are just continuing or extending the work which has already been done, or we are taking an idea and probably extending something out of that.
Mhm.
So it's an extension.
Mhm. Okay. Plus,
Even it
do
tells us about the
references
base standard, basically what is the datum which we are following,
Mhm.
like which reference, which journal it belongs to, and basically which author, whose paper we are citing to. So it gives a datum line.
Okay. So even if you actually, when you do not add any references, suppose you write in isolation, so you are not actually using any other work, then also, emphasis on references still you will be finding, and referencing still would be relevant. So why? Because
To avoid
references,
plagiarism?
to avoid plagiarism, of course, if you are actually using ideas of others. But referencing is important because actually it adds value to your ideas. So when you are actually putting up an argument, so it actually serves as a kind of defense, right? So people who have done similar researches, they also could have arrived at such an understanding of the thing, right? So there is actually similarity of opinion, ideas, or findings. So references are important because they add value to your argument. So they are very important, and therefore a lot of emphasis is given on references. And then of course appendices is also there, right? So this is a rough structure of every, even if you're doing a project proposal, this structure would be followed. If you're doing a report or a research paper, the same structure actually goes everywhere, right? Now, if we talk about types of academic writings, right? So, excuse me. Hmm. Yes. So if we talk about types of academic writings, then there are 4 types of academic writings, right? So what are the 4 types of academic writings? Anyone? So we have descriptive academic writings, we have analytical academic writings, then we have persuasive writings, and after that we have critical writings. Now, before I embark upon this journey, why I have taken up a discussion of these types, I should clarify, because somehow we need to understand the approach which we are adopting with whatever we intend to do. So whether we intend to do a descriptive essay, or we intend to do an analytical writing, or a critical piece it is that we are doing, or a persuasive writing. So if there is clarity in our approach, then it would make the writing very easy, comprehensible, and good, right? So, but then these are not watertight compartments, right? So the moment I say watertight compartments, what I mean, they're not watertight compartments. I mean that the boundaries actually melt and merge, and at times you'll find that a piece is both descriptive and analytical, or a piece is both critical and persuasive. So these are not watertight compartments, and all these qualities can actually coexist. They can coexist also in a piece. But still, if you are clear on what is the intention behind what you are doing, then it would actually ease out the process. So descriptive writing is writing which simply provides you with the information or facts. Normally, whenever you are actually doing a report, or you're summarizing something, you're trying to define something, then the piece actually would be an example of descriptive writing. So reports, results of experiments, and articles, they are all pieces of descriptive writing. After that, we have analytical writings. Now, the moment we say analytical, what does it mean? That it has got something to do with what? With analytical writings deal with what? Or they do what? They talk about logical reasoning. So some logical reasoning is involved. They are scientific in nature, right? Hmm? Yes. So analytical writings are basically scientific or logical in nature, and they require you to reorganizing the facts to reorganize the facts and information in groups, paths, and categories. And the moment you actually are how do you know whether it is analytical writing or not? Then when you are doing analytical piece, so you are analyzing something, you are comparing something, you are putting up a contrast, you are relating it to something else, or you are examining an idea or something. Now, majority of the scientific pieces, they are at the same time descriptive and analytical, right? After that, you have persuasive writings. The moment you say persuasive, it means that you actually want to persuade your reader to believe in your point or your argument. Now, there is a difference between, persuasive writings and other writings. So in persuasive writings, what happens is that you actually put forth a perspective, and your emphasis is on putting up such arguments that the readers actually agree with your point of view. And in that effort, you actually read about the point of view of others also, and you actually show by comparison how the point which you are putting is as more accountable and should be taken to be good enough or a better one, right? So persuasive writings are writings where our point of view is there and information is reorganized to prove our point of view, right? And majority of the claims which we made, they are supplemented by evidence, right? Now arguments, recommendations, interpretations of findings, and evaluation of the works of others, all this can be done in the process of you writing persuasive pieces. And whenever you find that you are arguing about something, you're evaluating something, you're taking a stand on something, then the kind of writing you're doing is persuasive writing. Then the last type of writing which we indulge more often is critical writing. So every research paper you do actually is critical in nature. So it's research writing, somehow research writing is synonymous with critical writing. So like persuasive writings, the point of view of others are there in it. So normally it includes, research papers, journal articles, and literature reviews in it also. Now, when you're doing critical writing, at times what you do, you analyze or identify the strength or weakness of an existing research. So sometimes what happens, a research is published, right? And then people sit and do critical papers on it. So what they are doing, they are analyzing it on the basis of their findings and their claims. They try to test, and they try to prove how they have understood the perspective, and whether they actually agree or disagree with, or they have some doubts about it. Then normally critique, debate, evaluate, disagree, such terms are associated with every endeavor which is critical in nature, right? Now, when you are writing an academic piece, then conveying the argument, it becomes very important, and it should get a lot of notice. So once you have the idea ready with you, you have brainstormed and you already are clear on what is it that you wish to talk about, then focus should go on how to convey the argument. So argument actually comes from the Latin word arguere, and which means to make clear. And academic argument is evidence-based defense of a complex issue. So because the issue is complex, so to make it understandable, a lot of evidence and a lot of explanation also goes into it. So it involves proposing a claim. So you're doing research papers, then you actually follow this process. So you propose a claim, on the you form a hypothesis, and then you go on the discussion part and you explain. So you offer rational reasons, and you give the readers with relevant evidence to prove the hypothesis which you have formed. Now, normally academic writing is either balanced or persuasive in nature, right? Yes. So the more, excuse me. Now, when you are actually going for putting up the argument, there are certain things which you should keep in mind. Like, for example, whether you could clearly define the point of view or the claim or not. Means your hypothesis is clear or not. You have checklist. This is a kind of checklist which actually helps you see whether you're conveying the argument with clarity or not. Then whether there are reasons, sufficient reasons to support the claim which you have made, then whether this belief or claim is built on reliable evidence or not. So evidence is actually of such nature that it justifies the claim or not. So that also you have to check. Then you ensuring a coherent connection between the reasons for supporting the claim. So the reason should be viable, should be valid. Then preparing a convincing and persuasive defense for counter arguments also becomes very necessary when you actually are doing an academic writing piece and then you're conveying your argument. So this is all I actually wanted to talk about as far as doing academic writing is concerned. Now, before we actually go to the next piece, we'll take a short break as I had declared earlier. And in this short break, I want you all, because majority of you are from the sciences, right? And even if you're not from sciences, this is a question which can be considered. So I have a question in front of you all. So what is the question? Can creative writing be of any use to the world of science? Here by creative writing, what I mean is imaginative writing, fictional writing. So can creative writing be of any use to the world of science? To the teachers, to the research, to the teachers or researchers, anyone? Can creative writing be of any use to us, to the people of science? What do you think? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So can you come up with any suggestions how? Shaji sir says yes, Jyoti madam says yes, Jinsa yes, Shirley yes, Raman yes. Okay, so all of you are saying yes, but then can you actually figure out, think, how are you going to use creative writing in your classes of science? So to make students understand something. Can we do it actually? I am from humanities, right? So, and I am from literature. So my domain is in the creative writing only. But you people are from the world of science. So do you put creative writing to use? And if you have never used it before, can you think of ways in which we can use it? Anyone? Can you give me an example of how we can use creative writing in science classes? And using means it should have some meaningful impact. So can it be used meaningfully? Yes.
Madam,
Think
impact
about
on
it.
society, madam, like severe impact of environmental issues on society is a very critical factor nowadays, which we are facing.
Mhm.
And I feel creative writing can be a meaningful way in helping us out in tackling this problem up to certain scale.
Okay, yes, you're right there. But can we, actually use creative writing to deliver the information of sciences to the students also? So somehow, suppose there is a concept. Can you use creative writing to explain that concept to the students also? Can it be done?
Definitely, madam, it can be done. Yeah.
Okay, how?
Madam, like pictorial representations are there,
Mm-hmm.
which are really meaningful, because diagrams and pictures, they are having a long lasting impact on the minds of the students, even people, normal people.
Okay,
So
a lot of Shashi sir, creativity goes when you are actually drawing a picture. You are putting creativity to use. But by creative writing, what I am actually meaning is imaginative, fictional writing. So can we use it in science classes? Have you ever thought about it?
Yeah, it can be done to convey the concepts.
Okay, can you exemplify how? I know it can be done. I believe it can be done, but then
There,
how?
there are various methods. It could be use of analogy or
Mhm.
role play or maybe a gamification
Mhm.
and so on. There are lots of
So may I
pedagogy.
know your name?
I am Chandra Kumar. Hello. Am I audible?
Hello. I think there is network issue from Vandana ma'am side. Please wait.
please bear with us while we sort out the problem.
I think network issue is there from Vandana ma'am side.
Yes, I had lost my connection. Am I audible now?
Yes, madam, you are audible.
Sorry for the disturbance. There was some network issue at my end. So I'll share the screen again.
Yeah, no issue.
अच्छा, उनसे भी कराने देंगे। अच्छा,
Looks like she has some network issue. Let's wait.
Yes, sir. Yes, we can wait, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, my mic was muted. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, ma'am, audible.
Okay, sorry for the disturbance. Actually, network is very weak here at my place. So we were actually talking about something very important. And my question to my academic fraternity was that can we put creative writing to use in the world of science? And we were actually having certain very good observations also, right? So, sir, apart from the fact that creative writing is really important in today's world, where there is so much of stress and there are so many problems, but apart from that, creative writing can be really put to use in actually teaching, in day-to-day teaching in science classes also. For example, I actually happened to hear one of my friends from sciences telling me that basically used to deal with the students of school, that if she had to teach them characteristics of virus, rather than teaching them it directly, she would actually make them write a story. So she'll say that you just write down a story about a virus which has attacked the world recently, and this virus actually changes everyone to zombies. Now, the moment zombies is brought, everyone gets interested. Kids are really interested in this, right? So, but then when actually they start doing the fiction piece and when they start talking about the features, what they come up with are the actual characteristics of the virus, right? So some of them might go imaginative to the extent that they'll actually think about something very noble also. But majority of the times, what they actually define or they include in the discussions are the real characteristics of the virus. So the moment it is done, what happens is that once and for all, they're through the features of the virus and they'll never forget it. So though creative writing is necessary for the world, because as human beings, our needs are not only, you had a lecture with Guru sir in the morning, right? So already you must have thought about this. The spiritual aspect of living, right? Now, materialistic aspect of life is important, but spiritual aspect of life is also very important. And a lot of stress, frustration, anger which we see in present society is because in our mad race of materialism, we have forgotten our spiritual needs. And as human beings, we need peace. Whether we believe in soul or not, it doesn't matter. But what is true is that all of us need to feel powerful. All of us need to be at peace, and all of us actually need to feel the purity which is there in us. And no material acquisitions can actually make us get that. So, spiritual needs ultimately surface. So, whatever faith, cult, practice you follow, um, latest religion is religion of humanity, isn't it? So religion is a way of life, and the latest one which we all have chosen to believe in is that of humanity. So we are here to actually cultivate highest ideals for humanity, right? So any which ways, if you do not think about spiritually also the spiritual aspect, then also creative writing actually can be made useful to the students of science, and it can actually attract their attention. So next time when you actually deal with your students and you have to tell them about some complicated concept, please consider if you can use creative writing or some fiction to make it interesting and appealing to them all. So we'll proceed further now. Yes. So in my next phase of discussions, I had planned that we would be talking about editing and proofreading in academic writing. So editing and proofreading also is very important in academic writing. Once your draft is ready, right, then this phase comes, that of editing and proofreading. Now, editing and proofreading is very important because you get to see whether there is clarity of ideas in your paper or not, in your text or not, whether the arguments have been properly defended or not, and then you also get to see the spelling, punctuation, grammatical errors. So it is essential that you actually proofread your essays and you give sufficient time to editing. Now let me ask my fellow friends, how much time you keep for editing? So those you who have been writing papers, sir, how much time do we need for editing and proofreading? Quickly, you can use chat box to write, right? A few hours, 1 day, 2 day. How much time you believe is essential for editing and proofreading? Yes, participants.
Ma'am, it depends on the length of the manuscript actually.
Very true, very true. So
If it is a 10 pages
research
paper, yeah, research paper, then it might take 3 to 4 days.
Yes.
Even it becomes less, 3 to 4 days it also become less, because when we do proofreading and editing, it takes time, and we think that okay, some ideas are left, so let us discuss them once again.
Very true. May I know your name, sir?
Ma'am, Anil Patil.
Yes, Anil sir. Okay, Shilpa madam believes 1 day, Kavya madam believes it depends on number of pages. Others, do you agree that we need 3 to 4 days? Or others? Yes, Sunil sir, 2 to 3 days. Others?
One day when when we have drafted our article and we know everything about it, then we can take 1 day. But if we are checking from other persons or any other person, then it will go for 3 or 4 days or even for 1 week also.
Yes, very true. But what actually I would recommend is that you actually keep 2 days, minimum 2 days for proofreading, even if it is your own piece. And if it is that of someone else, then as Anusha madam also says, some 4 days should be kept for it. Why? I'll tell you, because sometimes you are required to not only read it but reread it, and there are so many steps which are involved in this proofreading process, and there are so many things which you have to be careful about, right? So I have brought a checklist to you all. Normally what happens is that we actually give a lot of time to the development of argument, comparatively less time to the referencing part, and still lesser time to editing and proofreading. And this is most dangerous. keeping less time, giving less time to editing and proofreading is very dangerous. Then what happens? At times it culminates into modifications or revisions of paper, and if the errors are too many, then it might lead to rejection also, right? So you have to be really, watchful. You have to be careful that you at least give 2 days to editing and proofreading, and you make sure that you have actually gone through every piece. And then there should be a gap between, if you're doing your own paper, if you are editing or proofreading your own paper, then what I recommend is that the experts recommend is that at least 2 days time should be kept, and there should be a gap between writing of the paper and proofreading. If you can afford, then you should take a break of at least a day before you actually proofread. Because what happens is that when we have ideas floating in our mind, then we happen to read what is there in mind, and at times what is written there, it's slightly different. Small grammatical errors, punctuation errors, spelling errors, so they are likely to be left if you actually do not take a break between writing and editing phase. So it is recommended that at least a day break should be there. Then at least 2 days you should reserve, so that you can get to visit the text, and not only visit but revisit also. Now, what are the things which we need to watch out? So let's talk about the checklist. So you have to, and then yes, if you're actually checking the academic paper of your scholar or your students, then also the steps would apply, right? So, but now I am talking about if I am doing a paper, if you all are doing a paper, then what are the things you should keep in mind? So what I have written fits the assignment. So the paper also at times publishes, so their area of interest. So whether it actually suits it, fits it, that you have to see, because we choose journals and then we make submissions. So whatever journal you have actually chosen to submit it, it should be of such nature as the areas of interest match. Otherwise, what will happen? Even if the paper is very good, you can still have rejection where the editors may say that it doesn't suit our interest. And that is very discouraging, because it takes a lot of time. Reviewing process sometimes takes 6 months also. 2 to 3 months is minimum, 6-7 months also. So if you get rejection on this ground after 6 to 7 months, it would be very disheartening. So you have to make sure that the submission is being made to which journal, and it suits the area of interest of that journal or not. And not only the topic, but the format and the content, whether it is as expected by them or not. Then the hypothesis, can it be written in one clear sentence? If yes, there is clarity in it or not. So hypothesis should be actually clear and should be capable. You should be in a position to tell it in a sentence. Such clarity should be there in your thesis statement, right? It's main problem statement or hypothesis, right? Then I have provided adequate, yes, questions will take later on, right? You may please note it down, right? So whether I have provided adequate background information for the topic of my paper or not. Suppose there is an idea which actually needs some background information, then you cannot assume, where you have to know the audience to whom you are writing, and on the basis of that audience you have to assume how much they'll be knowing and what is actually which is required, right? So adequate background information is essential. Then you have to make sure that each portion actually connects to the main thesis statement. Then yes, so you have to check that within each portion you are introducing PTS form, right? Paragraph, topic, sentence form is there. So you introduce the idea which you are going to talk in that paragraph. Then you are actually talking about it, giving supporting evidence, developing the discussion, and then conclusion. Then whether you have used a variety of reliable academic resources to support your ideas or not, right? If you want your point to be taken, then sufficient evidence is required. For example, we are all, we all dissent, love to dissent, love to disagree. Academic fraternity encourages it. And for any critical writing to happen, it is important, so important that at times I tell my students that purpose of education is to teach you note of dissent. You should have the courage to disagree, and you should have the knowledge, understanding, and inclination to it, right? So within each portion, you have to make sure that resources are used which actually help you prove your point. And then if I paraphrase my resources more often than I quote them directly. So paraphrasing is important. Why? Instead of every time quoting the source is discouraged, because somehow the flow breaks. When you're actually developing your argument, if you paraphrase, you can refer to others' work, but still you can maintain your own voice, your own discussion and argument, right? But if you actually quote it, then it actually breaks the flow. So it is advisable that you should actually paraphrase more than using direct quotations. Use direct quotations only when it is very essential. After that, whether you have followed the style guide strictly or not.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Ma'am, please, we'll reserve it towards the end.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So because I have defined my timelines and there is sufficient space for question and answer session also, right? So whether you have used style guide properly or not, different domains actually propose different style guides. So sometimes it is APA, sometimes MLA, sometimes Chicago. So you have to make sure that you have your every entry is correct according to that style guide. Then your conclusion actually briefly summarizes the information of the paper and is still relevant. This is what you have to talk about, right? Then you have actually used straightforward professional tone in your paper. Then last, spelling and grammar. Once you have actually assessed the content part, then you actually focus on the presentation part, and then spelling and grammar comes. And to check spelling and grammar, what is recommended is that you read the paper loud. And when you're reading the paper loud, if you gasp for breath, if the sentences are too long, then it is suggested that you break it into shorter sentences if possible, because that would make it better, right? Then you should be using strong verbs in your sentences that actually propel your readers forward, so that actually motivates your readers to think about it instead of actually using weak verbs. So it is very important that we use strong verbs. So what are strong verbs? What could be strong verbs? Verbs like challenge, verbs like contradict or disagree or reject also, if you feel that you're rejecting a thesis statement or an argument. Then if you're confirming, then I confirm this, or I complement or substantiate, I support. So such powerful, strong verbs should be used in your sentences. You should be using active voice as often as possible, and you should be putting effort in eliminating redundant words, adverbs, and adjectives, right? So when you're talking about grammar, spelling and grammar, punctuation also should be carefully checked. Then at times we recommend that we are slow in catching our own errors, because it's our baby, our paper is our baby, our artwork. So at times, we fail to notice the errors because we are actually, it is in mind and we are reading it right. Even if black and white, it deviates. So if you feel that it happens with you, then you can consider peer reviewing also. You can actually ask your friend to actually read it for you and just give a structure to it. Skeleton structure. So whenever you tell your friend to review, what is it you'll tell him? That give a skeleton structure. So that if that skeleton structure is clear and well ordered, it means that there is clarity and it's good enough. And if not, then obviously your friend will help you know. And if you cannot go for it, then you can actually consider hiring an editor also if it is so required. Right? So another break time. We have actually talked about editing and proofreading. We'll be taking your question towards the end, ma'am, right? Okay. So I have a question to you all, to my fellow teachers. And the question is, do Indians lack in research aptitude? There is a charge against Indians by the international community. And the charge is that Indians actually do not have research aptitude. And they say that this is the reason why we do not have any significant inventions and discoveries and patents from India, right? So do you agree with this? Do we lack in research aptitude or not? Yes.
Ma'am, all are having research aptitude, ma'am. Everybody is doing, ma'am.
Okay, but then why is it that we, okay, so first let us answer in yes or no, and then we'll actually come to the next step. So how many of you believe this statement, this charge to be true against Indians, that Indians lack in research aptitude? So yes or no? Anusha madam says yes, we are complacent. Others, do you believe it to be true or not? You agree or disagree? Please, quick. Others. a serious charge. I am not actually weaving it myself. It is a charge against us by the international community. So Sunil sir says no, Shashi sir says no, then Padmavati ma'am says no, Paban Mohanty sir says agrees. Okay, yes. So yes, others say no. We'll talk about it. Yes. Okay, so majority say no. Now my question to you all is, if you do not feel it to be right, if you really feel that yes, we do have research aptitude, then why is it that we do not have any significant patents and discoveries and inventions to our credit compared to the world? What is the reason behind it? What do you think? Do we lack in research culture? What is the reason? Majority
Madam,
believe that we have research aptitude.
certain
So-
policy issues are there, madam, which
Okay.
like really inhibit these kind of things.
Hmm,
Otherwise, like IITs and IIMs, they are doing wonderful things.
Sir, but I have a question. While I
Yeah.
have deep regard for these institutions, IITs and all, still, why is it that we do not get so many patents, inventions, discoveries from
Madam,
IITs?
again, that's what I mean to say. Certain policy issues are there. This is there will be an open debate regarding these aspects.
Mhm.
Basically, that sincerity index is missing. Otherwise, aptitude is there.
Hmm.
But if like you are guiding somebody and that some of the student is not willing to do certain amount of work, then at the end of the day, you'll be like wondering, ki, okay, get the thesis submitted, do whatever you want in your future.
Hmm.
And in most of the systems, be it government or private system, these kind of practices are being followed. Otherwise, there is no lack of attitude and aptitude. But basically, if we are going to stop these kind of practices, then there will be patents and researches going on in nice numbers everywhere. Only the thing is, policy issues that needs to be fixed upon. That's it.
So just policy issues, we have research aptitude and culture and everything. Do we have research culture also?
Definitely, madam. In school days, we are having very good schooling system. Be it a government school or private schools, we are doing wonderful.
Do we have, sir? I have an objection. I would actually register my objection to it. Somehow, the school system has been so structured that it discourages the inquisitiveness, essential prerequisite of a critique, right?
Madam, again, it is a policy issue. Like in this corona pandemic, how many parents and how many students are willing to go to school? Most of the time, we'll be listening, no.
Yes, I agree with it, because first you have to live. Actually, then only you can make any significant contribution.
But madam, when everything is open, every aspect of economy is open, then why we are keeping the most important aspect of our country closed? I don't understand the reason. In foreign, almost all the education institutions are open. They are giving first and foremost emphasis on school education only and college education only.
Sir, let us, okay, fine, taken that students should go to school because maximum learning can take place there only. Meaningful learning can take place there only.
Yes.
But then what is it that teachers do in school? Strength of 60, 70, they come, they deliver a lecture, give ready-made answers, ask the students. Is it not story of every household that the younger kid, if you'll tell them, look, I am a teacher of English. If I'll tell my daughter, look, I am telling you it is wrong, still she'll insist. No, I'll write this only because madam has told to write this way. So,
Exactly. Madam,
is it a problem?
In certain cases, like you may be correct, but like considering the size of our country, the kind of infrastructure we have, I don't feel it is like in center schools. I studied in center school. I never found any problem related to academic policies of the school. I traveled throughout the country for my schooling.
I am a product of KV, sir, and I really appreciate this thing that KV teachers have been so trained that they don't discourage questioning. But if you look out and if you see the private setup, if you see other schools, then you'll find that somehow they discourage the spirit of questioning. So students are not made to find answers, but they are given ready-made answers and they have to just write it. And I'll tell you the dangerous result of it. When they come to university and suddenly we tell them you have to find your answers, then they're clueless. And what do? They do not start finding answers, they Google.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I tell my students, look, I don't want to know what Google thinks or what people on Google think about it. I know what they think. I want to know what you think about it. And it takes a lot of conscious energy and effort for people to make them believe that you're capable of thinking.
Madam, that's what I told you, certain policy issues are there which needs to be resolved. Basically, those things have inculcated wrong practices in our system.
Yes.
And if like we are going to freeze them, I think most of the things will be in order
Okay.
for the generations to
Why-
come.
Why I chose to bring this question here on this platform, that we are teachers. At present, we are some 81 teachers. If we can actually commit ourselves to this, that we have to develop this research aptitude in our students, and we teach them thinking, keeping this in mind, that they have to go for research after it, then I think it can be changed. If the teachers do not take initiative, nothing can be changed.
And we need to be the torch bearers, ma'am, basically.
Obviously, that's why I began with that teacher, enlightened, emancipated, empowered teachers, because we need to understand our role. And if we are committed enough, that in spite of every, problem, be it politics, of publication, of organization, still we can actually, make our students develop and actually explore and, make use of that research aptitude thing. So it was good talking about. Now we'll go back to our the main focus of the talk today.
And one more issue with the students is that, as
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
a professor in engineering college, students
Yes, ma'am.
always ask about what is the placement. They don't want to study. They want that they got more placed in a good MNC or not before entering into the college.
Yes, madam, you're from engineering. I did not wanted to say this, but majority of the IITians, they do not take research later on. So they take a job with some management company and they forget the research and on everything. So there is some problem with the system, government. It's not the problem with the students. It's the problem with the government and the setup which we have. So we are not giving sufficient money, sufficient opportunities for the students actually to go in research, and therefore they want to get placed with other companies instead of some research facility. So we have to work on infrastructure, of course, and then also yes.
Vandana
अगर
ma'am,
हम students में
Yes,
interest aptitude develop भी करते हैं, then because of the lack of resources, we can't do this.
No, so but then if we are actually intent upon it, then startups can be there. Still, we can give the students with an eye. So we can make a
Vandana ma'am.
They are not in the field of the research.
Yes. Okay, we'll take another. Yes,
ma'am,
sir.
may I
Yes.
share just few
Sure,
points?
sure.
Ma'am, we are on the right track of the problem solving, I think. See, it is motivation is missing, I think. If we talk about engineering graduates, and not only engineering, everywhere, if we just motivate, if the government, or not only government, NGOs and the firms which can motivate the people, graduates, to start their startups, small businesses. Obviously, research and startups can be a bloom in next few years, but that is missing.
Very
Now
true.
empowerment is missing, startups are missing, everything, and we think that we always say that okay, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Very true.
But we think, if it is necessary, I will not do it, let someone else do. That is why I think we lack research. There is no research.
A lot of motivation and a lot of concerted
motivation
effort
is
should go, sir. A
And
lot of
human beings are right. They are trained to do certain compulsory things. So research has to be made compulsory. As Shashi sir said just now, policy issues are of course the main issue, madam.
Yes, very true. And for that, I think if anyone can make any change, then we, the teachers, are the ones. And if we cannot change it, no one else can. Because ultimately, those whom we are training will take over. If they are inspired enough, then they'll change the policies and make things work also. So we teachers have to think in this direction and work in this direction with a focused and positive attitude. I think then in the longer run, India has had a great past, right? So if we can change it into talking about past is of no use, because everyone will ask what now. So we have to believe that we can make that change, and we have to work in this direction. So we'll now quickly, my job was to make you all think. And when you all have started thinking about it, my job is done, right? So we'll proceed further to the next phase of our discussion. So after this, I wanted to talk to you all about summarizing and paraphrasing. Why summarizing and paraphrasing? Because they are really important. And in research, when you are doing research papers, you actually put these to use, summarizing and paraphrasing. So Joseph Pulitzer, he came out with an excellent observation. So I would like to read it to you all. Put it before them briefly, so they will read it. Clearly, so they will appreciate it. Picturesquely, so they will remember it. And above all, accurately, so they will be guided by its Lie. So when we are actually summarizing, paraphrasing, doing papers and things, all these things should be kept in mind that you are actually doing something which will further the tradition of knowledge, and therefore conscious, serious attitude, commitment is what is required, right? Now, summarizing and paraphrasing, I said that both these things are put to use in doing research papers, right? So paraphrasing is used more often when doing research writings, because at times what happens, you have a line of thought, you have a topic, and you are putting up a defense for it. Then what happens that other ideas of other researchers, they go well with what you are actually talking about. But if you stop and quote, then your flow of thought will be broken. So for this, paraphrasing is used. So you use their idea, their word, their take, but you'll be putting it in your own words. So paraphrasing becomes even more important when writing research papers or when doing academic writing, right? So summarizing and paraphrasing, we all know what summarizing is, what paraphrasing is. We have read about it and we have done it previously also. So what are the, wait a second. So what are the points we have to keep in mind before we actually start summarizing or paraphrasing? So you have to remember that you have to work on your reading comprehension. So you have to really practice that you're good at it. Then you have to filter the main ideas from the details. No matter whether you're doing summarizing or paraphrasing, the main ideas still would be your focus, right? So you are in a position to filter the main ideas. Then you are in a position to follow the arguments, identify the key points, understand the thematic concerns, and differentiate fact from opinion. This is something very important, very, very important. Whenever you're doing a research paper, you have to discuss, debate, and develop your grounds on the basis of facts and not opinions much, right? So one or two places opinion would do, but one should not actually, deal much with opinions. Why we should be slow in actually talking about opinions? Can anyone say? I am saying that one should never debate on facts. Opinions, sorry. We should debate on facts, because when we are developing our arguments, sometimes we are debating also, right? So opinions, people should discourage actually to debate on them. Why? Why we should be slow in talking or debating about opinions? Why we should only focus on facts? Yes? Kavya, madam? Anyone else?
I had just one small question related to paraphrasing of quotes. Right? Like you said that we should paraphrase quotes. Is it allowed?
Paraphrasing of quotes. When you paraphrase, then you do not put it in quotation. You simply do an in-text citation, madam. Quotations are used, right? Paraphrasing, but the moment you quote it, quoting means quoting it word by word. So you do not quote it actually while paraphrasing. So when you are paraphrasing, you use in-text citation to tell that yes, this idea comes from there. So when you're quoting, then it's not paraphrasing actually. We'll take the questions later on, ma'am. Please note it down. I have sufficient time for question answer session, so that should not go, silently. So why my question to you all was be slow in talking about opinions. Why? Because no matter how strong you defend yourself, you cannot actually make people change their opinions. So you should talk about facts. You should actually deal with facts, because if facts can be proven, opinions you cannot prove. Actually, it's subjective. It's highly subjective. So after all argument, also the other side will say no. Still, I choose to believe this. So one should be very slow in actually entertaining opinions in a research paper or a critical paper. It's more often in practice in humanities and social sciences. So science's domain is facts. So they are slow in entertaining opinions. The moment we actually come to humanities and social sciences, then opinions actually start, taking the lead. But then in humanities and social sciences also, my take would be that be slow in registering opinions and then developing your papers on the basis of those opinions, because it's very less likely for people to change their opinion. So when you're doing a paper, better actually find out factual information, on the basis of it develop your hypothesis and then do the paper. then it will be taken well and it would be making some meaningful contribution. And then last point which you should remember before you embark upon your journey to summarizing and paraphrasing is you have to analyze the text also, right? Yes. So steps to summarizing. Now this is something we all know, but still I thought that because long we had practiced it, so let us talk about it quickly. So if you have to summarize, then you have to select a passage that supports your idea. You have to read it carefully to understand it. And I recommend my students to go for 3 readings because research paper is something serious. So first time, just skim it, bird eye view you take. Second time you start noticing important details, and third time when you read it you underline. I always suggest the students not to underline or pinpoint the points which you'll be using in the first reading, because when you read it for the first time everything seems important. When you read it second time, some information gets filtered, and when you read it third time, then you get pure information which would be really useful. So I always suggest that if possible, whatever you are actually going to use in your paper, you should be reading that passage or paragraph at least thrice, right? Then and if you have understood it well, then 2 readings also would suffice, but I always discourage reading it once and then going about it. So read it carefully till you understand. It may take 2 to 3 readings. Then take notes about the main points and ideas and supporting points you think you should be including in your summary, right? Then include keywords and terms used by the author, and think too, right, about how the source idea is relevant to the argument you are presenting in your paper. So when you are doing summary, when you are doing summary, all these things should be kept in mind. After that, yes, use your notes. So you have read the paper passage, you have understood it, you have made your notes. After that, you're summarizing, because summary means you do not have to follow it word by word. So you'll keep that text aside and using your notes. Your notes means your understanding of every important detail of the paragraph. So using just your notes and not the original text, you write down your line of thoughts. So explain the original author's main ideas to someone if you actually want to gain more clarity. Then explain how those ideas actually support the argument you are making or conflict your argument. So both ways we use the information to defend ourselves or actually to put up a counter perspective and then prove it wrong. So it can be used both ways, right? So then you go about doing it. Reread the original source once your line of thought is ready. Then is there any important information that you have forgotten or misremembered? You just match it. And then you see whether your summary is similar to the original source or not. And if it is yes, if it's all sorted, then you can actually put that summary into your research, and you can use in-text citation where you actually cite down from where you have taken this information, right? And adding in-text citation is very important, and that too in the proper formatting style which you are using. Why? Because I'll be talking about plagiarism towards the end of the discussion session, right? So why? Because plagiarism is something which should be avoided at any cost, right? So now steps to paraphrasing. So what are the things we have to keep in mind while paraphrasing? So paraphrasing is when you don't want to put quotation, but you want to use the ideas, all the ideas which are there in the passage. So you have to reword it. You have to restructure the argument to suit your style, the size, the paper which you are doing. So how do we do it? Reading is the same. We read it again and again till we have understood the thing. Then we underline the main points. I recommend doing it in third reading. Then we try to find, you can use thesaurus also. You try to find out synonyms of difficult words, and then you change the words, and you don't change the meaning. You just change the words. You'd use synonyms and all. Why do we use synonyms and all? To make it easy. So the purpose of paraphrasing is to make it easy. Then you break long sentences into smaller sentences, and then you simplify the structure of the sentences. Main intention behind paraphrasing is to make that complex idea reachable, accessible, simple, right? And therefore you simplify it. Paraphrasing is sometimes larger in length than the original piece also, because it intends simplifying. More or less it is same in length. So unlike summary, it is same in length, it is not short. right? Now, what can be done while paraphrasing? You can change the order of the ideas presented. You have to change the voice. Then you have to use quotation marks if you are actually borrowing terms and phrases. So if you're, yes, madam, while paraphrasing, if you use terms and phrases which are exact of the author, where you have not changed anything, then you'll use it, put quotation marks, because they're exact ideas which you have copied there. So you can use quotation marks also. But if you have changed them, then you'll be using in-text citation to quote the source, but you would not be using quotation marks. So quotation marks will go if any line is similar to the line of the exact copy of the line from the original text, then it should go in quotation marks. Then cite original ideas that are not your own. If you borrow idea and the idea is not your own, then you do not forget to cite the original text. In-text citation must be given. After that, proofread your paraphrase so that you know whether you are actually doing plagiarism or not. Accidental plagiarism. At times, what happens while paraphrasing is accidental plagiarism. So if we have to avoid accidental plagiarism, we have to read it and we have to compare it with the original to make sure that we are not actually indulging in what is called accidental plagiarism. And the 4 R's of paraphrasing is what you have to keep in mind. So what are the 4 R's? Read, to understand, then restate, so you actually put it in your words, in your voice, then recheck, check to see whether you have included all the points or not, and then repair. So accidentally you have not used any wrong or incorrect information, that also should be taken care of, right? Okay, so this is all about proofreading and editing. Question answer session. So whatever questions you all have, we'll take them towards the end. So this is last break, which I intend to take in this course. And my question to you all is, do you appreciate military talk? Yes or no? Quickly, chat box is there. Participants, 81 are there. If I get 40, I'll believe that you are not sleeping. If I don't get 40, I'll actually believe that you are not listening. So please, do you appreciate military? I have, and your time is valuable, sir. So everything which I'll bring here, I'll bring it because I seriously consider it is important for you to reflect upon it, right? So your time is valuable, and still I ask this question, so I have some meaning attached to it. Quickly, yes or no? Do you appreciate military talk? Yes? I repeat. Do we appreciate military talk? Military talk means when you are actually trying to tell someone do something, then you raise the tempo of your voice, you actually have a commanding voice and you are actually threatening that person, or you actually want that person to follow your orders and everything. So do, yes or no? Do you appreciate military talk or not? I believe answer is no for all. Yes?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am, we don't
Right.
appreciate.
Okay, good. But then do we indulge in military talk? At times when we are talking to our students,